and your admirers. Honorable Senators, we have a quorum, and I'm calling the meeting to order, et je vous souhaite la bienvenue au committee.
I'd like to welcome you to the Social Affairs, Science and Technology Committee.
Ogilvie from Nova Scotia, Chair of the committee. I'm going to invite my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Art Eggleton, Senator from Toronto, Deputy Chair of the committee.
Linda From, Ontario. Nancy Hartling, New Brunswick.
Chantal Petitclerc, Québec.
Carolyn Stewart-Olson, New Brunswick.
Judith Seidman from Montreal, Quebec.
Okay, well, this is our first of our scheduled meetings with witnesses on Bill S5, an act to amend the Tobacco Act and the Non-Smokers Health Act, and to make consequential amendments to another act, and it's also known by its short title, Tobacco and Vaping Products Act. Now, we have two panels of witnesses today, colleagues, and I want to remind us that each panel is 1 hour long, that we will use the one question per senator per round. I would ask you again to direct your questions in the first instance to a specific witness. If the alternate witness group wishes to respond, signal through the chair that you also want to add something to the response. Witnesses, I'm going to, and colleagues, I'm going to ask you to be very focused in your discussions, no long preambles, and if the witnesses will focus their answers with a minimum of extraneous background information. We have a great number of documents in our files. You must assume that all senators have read all the documents we have received, so you do not need to repeat long aspects of your other submissions to the committees, and get right to the answers. So we have today in our first panel, which will end no later than 5:15 p.m., we have from the Non-Smokers' Rights Associations, we have Melody Tilson, who is Director of Policy, and Pippa Beck, Senior Policy Analyst. And from the Tobacco Harm Reduction Association of Canada, we have Jay Blanchet, Director, and David Jones, Policy Advisor. I'm going to call them in the order they're listed on my agenda. And so, Ms. Tilson, I invite you to make your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today regarding Bill S5. As you heard, I am the Director of Policy with the Non-Smokers' Rights Association, and my colleague is the Senior Policy Analyst. We have both been with NSRA for more than 10 years, and I personally have worked in tobacco control for 27 years. NSRA is a national non-profit organization that has worked exclusively in tobacco control since the early 1970s. Our name reflects the fact that when we began our work, the key issue was protecting non-smokers from secondhand smoke. Since that time, our perspective has evolved, and we now focus much of our work on the root cause of the tobacco epidemic, the tobacco industry, and its strategies to promote tobacco use and undermine tobacco control. NSRA has been at the forefront of many significant tobacco control reforms over the past 4 decades, including campaigns for the Federal Tobacco Act, world precedent-setting graphic package health warnings, and for tobacco tax increases, just to name a few. NSRA strongly supports Bill S5. It provides a long overdue framework to legalize and control the sale of e-cigarettes with nicotine, and it includes important amendments to the Tobacco Act to provide the legislative authority to implement plain and standardized tobacco packaging. And with the Chair's permission, we would like to share with the committee a mock-up of what we see to be plain and standardized packaging.
To be fully certain that we are complying with all the rules of the Senate, I'm going to ask you to set them aside, and I will tell the senators that they can pick them up at the break. But we do not normally use props within the issue unless it's illustrative of something that we are researching as a study.
Okay. Nonetheless, there are a number of amendments that we believe are critical to strengthen the bill and ensure that it fulfills the government's intent. Committee members should have a copy of our detailed list of amendments. Given time constraints, I'm only going to highlight a few. I'm going to begin with the provision to establish legislative authority for plain and standardized packaging measures. As drafted, S5 prohibits a limited number of promotional elements on tobacco packaging, and I quote, the use of terms, expressions, logos, symbols, and illustrations. We want to ensure that the government has the authority to enact all of the prohibitions outlined in the plain and standardized packaging consultation document. So we are seeking an amendment that would explicitly expand the list of prohibited promotional elements. Tobacco companies have increasingly exploited every possible packaging design element to minimize the impact of the health warnings, to downplay health concerns and convince smokers that they can choose a less harmful brand or brand variant rather than quitting, and to continue promoting a variety of brand identities to target new smokers. We believe that in addition to expressions and symbols, it is essential that plain and standardized packaging also prohibit variations in package size, shape, and opening style. It is also essential that the government limit brand and brand variant names so that companies cannot use brand names, for example, to connote positive lifestyle or body image associations. You will likely hear from staunch opponents to plain and standardized packaging from tobacco companies and their allies in the Canadian Convenience Stores Association and the National Coalition Against Contraband Tobacco that plain packaging doesn't work, that it causes contraband to increase in Australia, and that it will fuel the contraband market here at home. In fact, none of these statements is true. NSRA has prepared a fully referenced document that debunks all of the myths about plain and standardized packaging that tobacco companies and their front groups are spreading around the world. We have provided an electronic copy, and we've given a hard copy to the clerk today. The comprehensiveness and thus effectiveness of the plain and standardized packaging regulations that Canada ultimately mandates may depend in part on the extent to which tobacco industry lobbying does not interfere with policy making. To this end, we feel it is very important to amend the Tobacco Act to ensure greater public awareness of tobacco industry activities to undermine public health policy, in partial fulfillment of Canada's obligations under the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Note that the term tobacco industry is defined very broadly in guidelines to the Global Treaty and includes industry allies in the retail sector and others. I believe that committee members received last night a copy of an internal Imperial Tobacco presentation, this one here, that proves the extent to which the Canadian Convenience Stores Association and NCACT play key roles in tobacco companies' strategies to prevent tobacco control measures. Our amendment would require that companies disclose to the Health Minister information on activities and expenditures related directly or indirectly to influencing health policy, and that all such information be available to the public unless prohibited by the regulations. I will mention only briefly two other amendments that we believe are essential. We need amendments to ensure that herbal shisha and water pipe use are fully covered by the provisions of the Act, and we also believe it is important to prohibit tobacco promotion through the sale of tobacco-branded accessories and non-tobacco products and services. Turning now to vaping products. NSRA supports most of the measures in S5 to regulate the marketing and sale of vaping products, both with and without nicotine. However, we believe that despite Health Canada's stated intention to balance risk with access, Bill S5 focuses disproportionately on the risks of vaping products without adequate consideration of the potential benefits, health benefits, and economic benefits of shifting large numbers of Canadians away from smoking. Health Canada has stated that vaping products are likely less harmful alternatives to tobacco use, and this is incorrect. Although the extent to which vaping is less harmful than smoking remains a topic of spirited debate amongst scientists, the evidence to date shows that e-cigarettes are less harmful than cigarettes. Research also indicates that beliefs that vaping is as risky as smoking may impede smokers from trying and regularly using e-cigarettes, choosing to continue smoking instead. While it is important for people to know that vaping products are not inherently safe to use, it is equally important for smokers to know that less harmful choices exist. Smokers desperately need and have a right to reliable information about vaping products on which to make informed decisions. As drafted, Bill S5 provides no assurance that regulations would require the provision of relative risk information, which clearly runs counter to the goal of the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, and I quote, to protect the health of Canadians in light of conclusive evidence implicating tobacco use in the incidence of numerous debilitating and fatal diseases. To this end, we have proposed a number of amendments that would permit and indeed require both companies and the government to provide accurate relative risk information. We are also recommending a number of amendments to limit the promotion of vaping products, including a ban of lifestyle advertising and an essential provision to establish regulatory authority that would permit the government to adjust controls on vaping product advertising and promotion in response to prevalence data and market developments. Thank you for your time and attention, and we look forward to your questions this afternoon.
Thank you very much. And now I will ask Mr. Jones, the Policy Advisor to the Tobacco Harm Reduction Association of Canada, to make your presentation.
Thank you. The Tobacco Harm Reduction Association of Canada, TRHA, would like to thank this committee for having us here for this invitation to provide evidence to you on behalf of consumers. TRHA is a national international rights education organization, and we advocate for vapers and smokers to be given the freedom to have access to safer alternatives and combustible tobacco products. TRHA has no conflicting interests in the vaping, tobacco, or pharmaceutical industries. We're not medical experts or scientists, but we are the consumers of this product. Sir.
Slightly slow your speech in order for the translators to get it. That does not increase the time you have allotted.
Sure. Are you sure? Our views are based on real science as delivered through peer-reviewed studies by world's leading scientists, medical professionals, and tobacco control experts, and our experiences as ex-smokers and now vapers. Bill S5's impact on tobacco and smoking vaping regulations will impact the health now and the future of a large portion of the Canadian population. In order for that impact to be beneficial, Bill S5 must be based on real science and a tobacco harm reduction strategy without bias or smoking ideology. We owe this to the 37,000 Canadians who die each year from smoking-related diseases. We owe this to their friends, families, and the future of our youth. We have discussed these issues with the vaping community, leading international and Canadian vaping experts, and the critical analysis is that Bill S5 in no way supports harm reduction or the potential of vaping. It conflates vaping with smoking, which will deter a significant portion of current and future smokers from switching to a safer product. The real fight is against smoking, not nicotine or vaping. S5 has redefined smoking to include vaping. The act of vaping is not smoking, as there is no combustion or tobacco. Vapor is not secondhand smoke. Nicotine is not tobacco. This definition needs to be clearly separated so as not to encourage confusion, as it implies vaping is the same as smoking. Bill S5's emphasis is focused on the harms and safety concerns of vaping without the key issues of relative risks compared to smoking. Consumer e-cigarettes should not be relegated like medicine or tobacco. Instead, an evidence-based regulatory standalone act specific to e-cigarettes, as per HESAC Recommendation 3, should be created that addresses legitimate safety concerns but maximizes smokers' knowledge of and access to alternative harm reduction products. Bill S5 emphasizes that this act is primarily aimed at stopping youth from vaping and smoking using a gateway theory, that youth will start vaping and then graduate to smoking. This has caused an overly cautious approach on a theory that has been debunked by many reputable health organizations, such as the University of Victoria, Public Health England, and the Royal College of Physicians, to name but a few. Current studies, surveys, and reports suggest that youth vaping has increased. For the latest Health Canada, FDA, and UK reports all show record low youth and adult smoking. Is this a factor of experimentation of possible harm reduction efforts by existing youth smokers, or some other factor? More research and monitoring is required on youth and non-smoker vaping. However, electronic use is frequently misreported, with everpuff, overuse, and experimentation as presented as regular use. Public Health England states that among youth, e-cigarette use is almost exclusively confined to those who are existing smokers. A major component of the vaping experience is different flavorings, which helps smokers quit and keeps vapers from relapsing. TRHA does not support any bans on flavoring unless there is a legitimate science-based reason or health concern, and not because youth may like the same flavors that adults like. There should only be common sense-based restrictions on packaging and advertising that may appeal to youth, with input from stakeholders, and no prohibition on accurate names of all flavorings. Like any product, consumers need accurate descriptions to make purchases without being confused. There is no solid guideline for what reasonable grounds on what appealing to youth actually means. All the sensory attributes are subjective, depending on who makes decisions on what is youth appealing, based on criteria that has so many variables. This would require stakeholder consultation to develop objective criteria for this type of regulation. What one person may think is aimed solely at youth, another may think otherwise. It must be stated that youth under 18 years of age are already restricted from purchasing these products. As it stands, Bill S5 prevents smokers from receiving relative risk information, which clearly runs counter to the stated goal of the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act, to protect the health of Canadians. Does this mean that a consumer who makes an online review or on vaping or battery safety or testimonial is a criminal? It places every scientist, advocate, vapor, and vape shop employee in an ongoing series of choices about giving accurate and personalized information that could save the lives of smokers and risking fines of up to $500,000 and 2 years in jail. Even Health Canada recognized that vaping products could bring public health benefits. Does that mean they would also be in contravention? Would they go to jail? Bill S5 introduces the same regulations for vaping products that are in place for tobacco products in all federally regulated workplaces. A federal vaping policy that treats e-cigarettes users like traditional cigarette smokers may discourage many federal employees from making a complete switch to the less harmful product and away from a tobacco harm reduction strategy. TRHA does not support any bans based on possible harms unless the health hazards are evidence-based and scientifically proven. In summary, standalone legislation, including TRHA's recommendation and those made by the Hesher Report 2014, will propel Canada as a world leader in tobacco harm reduction. This will support the goals of public health through tobacco harm reduction for smokers, vapors, their families, and all Canadians, by helping reduce smoking and related deaths. This also lessens the burdens on public health budgets and is a major win for all Canadians. Canada deserves a modernized 21st century approach to tobacco and nicotine regulation that will reduce harm and remain relevant in the face of rapidly changing technology and an ever-increasing spectrum of alternative nicotine products. E-cigarettes and the development and marketing of other reduced risk options for Canadian smokers will represent an unprecedented public health opportunity. Do not let this pass us by. Consumers and industry are major stakeholders in any legislation concerning vaping and need to be directly involved with future hearings and following regulations and consultations. Nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you came in within your time. Thank you. I'm now going to open up the floor to questions, beginning with Senator Petitclerc, to be followed by Senator Seidman.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones, flavor is one of the big concerns of the bill, and so let's get it out of the way at the beginning. We read a lot from the vaping community, and I've been following how and many campaigns, you know, they're taking away flavors. You're taking away my flavor, and that helped me stop smoking. And it is a misconception, as you said yourself, you know, like the flavors will not be banned, the name will be changed, and the promotion of names targeted to kids are what we're trying to achieve here. So I guess I want to have your opinion because and your view on that, because my thinking and understanding of it is that probably there will be a transition, because if the name changes, a consumer will need to learn the new name, but that's only temporary. And in the end, isn't it more important to protect our youth?
I would say that flavors are very important to the experience from smoking to vaping. Every vapor has gone through that transition and has used flavor, be it fruit, dessert, tobacco. What makes us stops us from relapsing into going back to smoking. To get to your point, I would suggest that when you say candy or a dessert name should be changed because youth may like that. Well, youth like many flavors that adults like. Now, when I go into my vape shop and I want to get an apple pie flavor or another candy flavor, and he says, "Well, I'm sorry, but I can't put that name on there because some kid might like it." Well, I'm sorry, but I want to know exactly what I'm purchasing. As like any consumer, if you go into a liquor store and you look for a drink that has apple pie in it, you don't go into a liquor store and see nothing that says apple pie and it has some other name that denotes that particular item. It would be very confusing, and I would be actually upset because it's a real name. Because some youth might like the same thing, well, youth like a lot of things that we like too, especially flavors. It's the thing, like ice cream, like anything. So I think that when you put a product out that says ice cream or apple pie, well, that's what it is. You don't change the name because some kid might like it. That's a position. Jenny?
I agree with you.
Ms. Tilson.
Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I'd like to address
Ms. Bitt?
the senator. It's our understanding that it's not the names that would be changed; it's the inherent flavors. So we're not against flavorings for nicotine products. It's just ones that are overtly targeting children, such as candy and dessert, wouldn't be acceptable. And there's a whole range of crazy named flavors out there that nobody knows, like unicorn puke and all sorts of crazy things that no adult really would be attracted to, but so I think it's in that realm where it gets a bit tricky.
We're going. No, Mr. Jones, we're not going to get into a debate among witnesses. Okay. Thank you, Senator Petitclerc. Do you have sufficient response on your question? Thank you, Senator Seidman, to be followed by Senator Eggleton.
Question for you, Mr. Jones, and as well as you for Ms. Tilson. The questions are different, so is that possible? State them at the same time? Oh, okay, thank you. Mr. Jones, you say in your presentation to us that the act of vaping is not smoking, there's no combustion or tobacco, and of course, that's quite true. And so you say nicotine is not tobacco, and you use this as some rationale for your argumentation to us. However, what we do know is that nicotine is a highly addictive substance. And, in fact, it can be toxic. So, even deadly, depending on the concentration. So, Bill S5 doesn't establish standardized levels of nicotine for the liquid used in vaping. Would you recommend safeguards around the liquid ingredients, specifically standards for nicotine levels?
I certainly agree there should be safety standards set. And I think ECTA, which is going to be talking tomorrow, is the standards and regulations for e-liquids for that type of requirement. But safe to say that, yes, nicotine can be addictive, but we found out that nicotine in cigarettes are highly addictive because of the way that the cigarette companies have made them because they've added extra chemicals. We've noticed that within the vaping community, most vapors start at, at a certain level, and they decrease their nicotine levels down to zero in most cases. In my case, I went from 24 down to zero. If it was as addictive as people would say, then I would not be able to do that. And the same condition applies for nicotine replacement therapy, like gums and patches that also have and contain nicotine. They're used to bring people down to a zero and for cessation. So to say that nicotine is highly addictive, it depends on in which cases you mean.
Ms. Beck wants to come in, and as a result, I'll put you on the second round.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to point out that nicotine technology is changing rapidly, and although some of the current products on the market might not be able to deliver, we can expect that with third generation and as the technology changes, they will better and better and better be able to mimic the tobacco or the nicotine delivery that a cigarette currently delivers. And so in one respect, that's really exciting because it's going to make them even more effective for as a cessation product. But on the flip side of that, we do need to be very careful in terms of them being in the wrong hands.
Senator Eggleton to be followed by Senator Stewart Olson.
Well, I think the major issue we're probably going to be dealing with is vaping concern about youth versus smoking cessation. So I want to ask, I've got Mr. Jones' views quite clearly here on the matter, but I want to hear a little bit more from the Non-Smokers' Rights Association, because while you support vaping being covered in the legislation, being regulated, you also talked about it in terms of cessation program, that it has advantages for people to get off of regular tobacco cigarettes. So the concern is in terms of these flavors. This seems to be, and I've heard this before, not just from Mr. Jones, but I've heard it before, that seems to be a major factor in people deciding to go the route of e-cigarettes or the vaping. And yet, there's the concern that it might be attractive to children. But Mr. Jones says, well, there's no evidence that children are smoking anymore. There's record low levels of youth and adult smoking, in fact. While the vaping is increasing, that doesn't seem to be increasing. So maybe the evidence doesn't quite back up the fact that maybe children are susceptible to this. I don't know. But I'd like your comment on that. I'd like to know, how do we square that? How are we going to be able to provide for legislation that could help people to get off cigarette smoking without it becoming a gateway, as is frequently said, for young people?
Ms. Tilson.
So there are a number of parts to the answer. Flavoring is definitely one piece of the puzzle. And we believe strongly that the legislation needs to balance risks to young people taking up vaping and becoming addicted to the nicotine in vaping, regardless of whether vaping products are a gateway to cigarettes. That's another whole issue. But at the same time, as we said, we want these products available to help smokers get off the most dangerous form of nicotine, which is cigarettes. So flavoring is one aspect where these products are appealing to children. There are various studies and surveys that show that it's the flavoring that entices them to try these products. So has Health Canada arrived at a perfect solution, a perfect compromise? I don't think such a thing exists. We know that fruit flavors are appealing to children, but they're also a very common choice amongst vapors. So we don't support a ban on fruit flavors, but we do support what the regulation is or the legislation is proposing, which is a ban on confectionery candy flavors. There's no reason for a vaping product to be in a gummy bear flavor in order for there to be sufficient flavored choices available for adults that want to use these products. We also have proposed a number of restrictions on promotion. We don't think there should be unfettered promotion of a product that is addictive. And although it is safer than smoking, that doesn't mean there shouldn't be controls, and hence our strong recommendation that regulatory authority be added to the bill that would allow the government to adjust permitted forms of promotion down the road, which could mean liberalizing or restricting depending on what happens with youth uptake and with quitting. So there are a lot of unknowns, and the data from the UK does not necessarily reflect the data here or in the US in terms of youth experimentation with these products. And when e-cigarettes with nicotine are legalized, we will have a different situation. Big Tobacco that produces some of these products will in all likelihood be entering the market.
We will take one from your group on any given answer. So thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator Stewart Olson to be followed by Senator Neufeld.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. I have real concerns over the legislation. I'll be absolutely direct with you. And I also, I would like your comments from both, if you wouldn't mind, from both groups, on this legislation is really driving people towards vaping. We don't know that much about vaping. Certainly with nicotine in the vaping, I'm concerned that it's just changing one addiction for another, and people are saying, well, it's less harmful, but we don't know that. People didn't know that it was harmful to smoke tobacco for years, and I think we have to consider that anything you take into your lungs is a potentially dangerous drug. So I'd like your comments on that, please.
Mr. Jones first, and then I'll go to Ms. Beck.
Yes, we have 37,000 people that die each year from smoking. Are we happy with allowing that to happen year over year? We do know that after 10 years of data for vaping, it is certainly a lot less harmful to those people who have switched. So with any people that actually quit smoking for vaping, that has to be much better than the status quo of those people dying as we have now. So I think that, yes, vaping is not benign. It's not 100% safe. Nothing is. However, it is something that will actually allow people to get their requirements should they use nicotine. And as I said before, a lot of vapors go down from a certain amount of nicotine down to zero. My own son quit smoking and he quit vaping. So this is a proven fact. There's thousands of vapors. There's probably hundreds of thousands of vapors in Canada and across the world, millions that have tried this and are doing the same thing because they don't want to smoke anymore. We are not smokers. And I think people have to realize that. We are not smokers. Okay? And vaping is not smoking. And that's a big thing that people have to realize.
Ms. Beck?
Thank you. The evidence is still emerging. We don't have a robust body of evidence like we do for tobacco, but we do have a lot of experience in studying tobacco, and so the evidence is quite clear that e-cigarettes are less harmful. But as Melody said, the spirited debate is around the degree of less harm. Is it really 95%, as we often hear? I think I was just at a meeting with Health Canada, and international experts were agreeing it's probably, well, the consensus is more in the 60 to 80% realm, which gives us unparalleled opportunity to really make a difference in this epidemic that we're facing. Nicotine replacement therapy is effective in certain cases when it's used with counseling, etc. There are barriers, but you don't see groups forming organizations cheering around nicotine replacement therapy. This is a totally different ballgame, and I think you're right. We still don't know all of the details around what's in the vape, but I think we've got enough information that we need to move on this. Lives are at stake, and as more evidence becomes clear, we can hone our regulations based on what Melody said. So you're right, but this is an opportunity we can't miss.
Thank you. Senator Neufeld to be followed by Senator Greenrain.
Thank you. So I haven't smoked for 33 years. But when I did smoke, I didn't buy a package of cigarettes because the package was pretty. I bought them because I wanted cigarettes and to smoke cigarettes. So I'm just a little bewildered why I think there's a real deterrent to the pictures that they have on cigarette packages now, to be perfectly honest, of what can happen if you smoke. Why would packaging that's plain help a person not smoke? I just don't get the correlation. I mean, if you see someone without a throat or their mouth half gone on a picture of cigarettes, I think that would deter you more than just a plain package. I don't understand that.
Ms. Tilson?
Thank you very much for the question. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to answer that. Packaging is the last bastion of marketing that's available to tobacco companies in this country and in various other countries such as Australia and the UK, where plain packaging has already been implemented. If you haven't smoked in decades, you probably haven't been up close and personal with a cigarette pack. You might be surprised how they've changed. This is what a cigarette pack looks like nowadays. So those huge graphic warnings that my own organization and many other health groups fought really hard for, well, they're practically illegible and invisible. There's no in-your-face ugly graphic here. There's a pretty little package, and inside the pretty little package, there's more pretty colorings that belie the toxic nature and addictive nature of the product inside. So one of the things that plain and standardized packaging would do is make the warning graphic and visual and stand out again. And there are all kinds of studies, dozens and dozens of studies from different countries that show one of the most important aspects of plain and standardized packaging is to make the warning more salient, to make smokers pay more attention to the warning, to make non-smokers who see a package lying around take heed of this warning. The industry uses all kinds of different design features to downplay the warning. Here's another recent pack. This is called a side push pack. This is standalone. It can go in your purse or your pocket just like this. Guess what? There's no warning. There's no warning on this package, which is mandated by law in Canada. So there are many workarounds to undermine the effectiveness of package warnings. The other thing tobacco companies have done is use colors to imply that certain brand variants are lighter. We banned the term lighter, but they use more white on the packaging, lighter colors, more different brand descriptors, and I could go on and on to suggest to smokers, you don't need to quit. Switch from that robust red colored package to a lighter colored package, and you will be smoking a lighter cigarette, which means less tar. And again, there are dozens of studies from all over the world that show that this is in fact what smokers believe when the packages come in different colors. Smokers also believe that little packages like this hold less harmful products than big packages like this. So there are many things that plain and standardized packaging could do. And the last point I'd like to make is it makes no sense on logical grounds or ethical grounds that a product that is highly addictive and that kills 1 out of every 2 long-term users should be allowed to be sold in attractive branded packages. Governments need to do everything they possibly can to get people not to start and to help them make the decision to quit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Green-Rain to be followed by Senator Ford.
Thank you very much. I'm very curious, 2 things. First of all, for Mr. Jones, how is your organization organized? Is it do people who vape buy a membership, or how is your organization set up, and how is it funded?
Would you like to?
We're all directors of the board. We have public advisors, and then we have a membership of 1,200. We are all 100% volunteers, and we represent the consumers of Canada.
I'm sure you're volunteers, but there must be some expenses incurred by the organization. So for the 1,200 people who join, do they pay a membership fee?
No,
do they
do
pay an
not.
annual fee?
No, they do not. They are members of our Facebook website.
Okay, so where does the revenue come for your organization to exist?
A lot of it comes out of our own pockets. We pay a lot of our own expenses because we are volunteers. We believe in what we're doing, so we don't charge any money to our members to be with us because we're trying to help everybody to get off smoking. So that's what our rationale is.
Thank you. The other question I would have would be for both groups, and that is, looking down the line, as you know, our government intends to legalize marijuana. What is your concern? Do you have any concern about the marijuana flavor being vaped by children and marijuana itself being vaped as opposed to smoked? And so I'm concerned about the age that we're embedding in this as being perhaps too young when it comes to marijuana.
You, a very quick answer. This is outside this bill, so
There actually, just provide in the bill, there's marijuana flavoring is banned, and once the legislation comes into effect for marijuana, it in turn would address the issues around e-cigarettes.
exactly. Thank you. Senator Frum to be followed by Senator Hartling.
Ms. Tilson, I just want to invite you to amplify on your suggestions for amendments. You went through them pretty quickly, and one of them you mentioned about that there maybe is a need to also regulate other related vaping-related products, and as a non-vapor, I'm not sure I know what those are. Can you explain that a little bit?
Rothman, Svensson, and Hedges just introduced a new product in the last month or so called IQOS, which is a hybrid product between tobacco and vaping. So it has tobacco in it, but it also doesn't combust. And this is just the beginning of a whole new generation of these hybrid products. I mentioned technology is changing quickly, and it's not just this company, it's all three big tobacco companies. And so we need to be prepared to make sure that our legislation is going to be able to capture all of these new products. And Health Canada has advised that IQOS will be captured as a tobacco product, but as these products become more obscure and so forth, we just need to make sure that the legislation doesn't allow for any cracks. And so we're recommending that the definition of tobacco be expanded, and we're pleased to see that there's regulatory authority under the definition of a vaping product to include any product as a vaping product. So,
Thank you. Senator Hartling.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm just wondering, I know we're quite aware that secondhand smoke does affect us, and I'm just wondering in the vaping products, do you know if there's any research been done on the vaping stuff that comes out to the user or to other people? Is there any research on that, either of you know?
Well, actually, there's quite a lot of information that's come out over the last couple of years.
Yes.
Obviously, it's been one of those major concerns in terms of what is coming out. Obviously, it's not benign. There are certainly some chemicals that do come out, but the latest research that's come out has shown that the level of exposure to the bystander is at such a low level that it should not harm bystanders. I think that we've actually sent that in as part of our submission as to the latest studies. And also for the vapor gets what that person needs, which either is a little bit of nicotine or no nicotine, but it's the actual habit of using a vaping to just enjoy themselves. You have to remember, vaping has two aspects. One is to enjoy themselves, be the same as smoking, but it's not smoking. The other aspect is that you can use it for cessation. I said my own son used it for cessation and quit both. So there's two aspects to this. You know, just like somebody that likes coffee or decaffeinated, same idea.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm just wondering about, just thinking about effects on other people around, children or breastfeeding mothers or things like that.
There has been some studies on that, and we can certainly give you some more information about that. But right now, the levels that they've identified have been at low levels. It all depends on how the actual vaping is used. Okay, and some of the studies show that high levels, but that's because it's not in real world, and it's not used by real vapors. So they kind of build it up, and scare people without using real information.
The information is building. It remains inconclusive, but I do agree with David Jones that from what we see so far, the toxins within the vapor are in trace amounts, but the science as it stands is riddled with methodological problems, and so we need to be cognizant of that. And our organization is advocating that smoke-free spaces stay as smoke-free and vape-free. Because it's a false comparison to say that vape is less harmful than secondhand smoke. All of our environments are smoke-free right now, and so we don't want to see a chemical introduced into the environment of questionable, until we know more about it. And the other issue is that smokers have been able to abstain in smoke-free environments, and so to suddenly begin to vape, be permitted to vape indoors is a step backwards for individual smokers, and it's or vapors, and it's a step backwards for public health as well.
Thank you. Senator McFedrin to be followed by Senator Petitclerc.
Thank you so much. This is a question to Mr. Jones, and certainly your colleague, you're welcome to answer as well. But I was very struck by how you answered the question about the funding for your activities. And I didn't hear you say that you pay personally for all of your expenses. So my question is to just understand more clearly the sources of funding for your activities promoting vaping. And let me be more specific. Do you receive any funding to your organizational efforts from retailers? Do you receive any funding for your organizational efforts, including presentations such as today, from producers of vaping products or anything related to vaping?
Absolutely not. This is purely out-of-pocket expense.
So you pay on an individual basis as volunteers for all of your expenses for your organization, everything related to any advertising, travel,
That's correct.
everything
Yes.
you pay as volunteers.
That's right. That's right. We represent the consumers. So for us to accept funds from organizations